This is the American Indians, Indigenous Peoples' Truths. Justice for all, the most dangerous show on media anywhere. OCO, Leslie, how are you?
Halito, how are you?
I'm good. Before we get started, would you please give us the land acknowledgement?
Absolutely. Let's pause for a moment to acknowledge the traditional stewards of our lands that we reside on. Currently, the sovereign people of this land that I reside on are the Lenape, and I believe that is the same for you, Elder. And especially their ancestors, descendants, and all indigenous people who live now and have ever lived on this land we call Turtle Island and beyond. But more than acknowledgement, let's honor and support our existing indigenous communities by helping them continue their land-based practices, traditions, and way of life, by dispelling false narratives about their history and people while promoting their authentic truths, helping them heal from past wrongs and offenses, and assisting them in protecting and restoring back to health the land, nature, and the water which brings life.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You are absolutely welcome. So this has been a long time coming. We have not had a fireside chat in a long time. So I'm looking forward to this. We had a really wonderful time last week at our the powwow at Bowie State University. Bowie State. So we are going to bring in our guest this evening for our fireside chat. And right now our panel is open to everyone who is viewing our program right now to ask questions. Ask as many questions as you'd like to ask, and we'll try to answer them as much as possible. So let's bring everybody in. Lona, can I get you on camera? I think she's still working on that. Mm-hmm. So there she is. Hello. All right, so let's get everybody discussing, talking. Can we do just a brief introduction of everyone? Can you introduce yourselves, please?
Okay, let's start with you, Pete.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having.
We froze up.
Okay, so we'll just let's go on. Let's move on to Lona.
Okay, I am also the director of American Indian Movement in the state of Maryland, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C., and Virginia.
Okay, Pete, we're having some issues with your audio. It's going in and out. So maybe you might want to come back in and join us so that we can get you on audio. Seems like it's a little tinny or something. So just join back in, please.
Okay, so let's go to Lona Elias, my good friend, Lona. In less than 2 minutes, give us a brief introduction of who you are.
Good evening. I'm Lona Elias. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm a child of my family. My great grandmother, Choctaw, Chickasaw. My grandfather, African. Spirit has been very important to me. I'm a spiritual life coach. I'm a classically trained actor and producer, radio television producer. I host a show on Pacifica Radio called on WPFW in Washington called Spirit of Jazz, which airs on Sunday mornings, and it is an exploration of our possibilities, recognizing that we are being human, and ask the question every Sunday: if we're being human, then who are we truly, and how do we access that and make that alive
Okay.
in our actions?
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Tony Bates.
I am Tony Bates. I am a producer and host of radio and other media. I have been working for about 20 years in the field, and I'm currently building a brand new podcast that focuses on the nexus of spirituality and health and technology, and hope that I can eventually come back on and talk to all of you about that.
Okay. So, Tony, I know you. So you're Cherokee, right? And
That is correct.
Cherokee and Blackfoot and your people are from North Carolina, right?
South Carolina, Cherokee County in South Carolina, a little town called Gaffney.
All right, good. Thank you so much. So is Pete back? Pete, are you there?
Yes, he's here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, tell us who you are.
I'm Pete Landeros. I'm the director of American Indian Movement in Maryland, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C., and Virginia. I'm also the newest member of the Indian Commission here in the state of Maryland. I'm a Yaqui Indian from southern Arizona.
All right, but you grew up here in this area, right?
Yes. I've been here since the early 70s.
Pete has a great history. His father was a good friend of mine. His dad was actually the first Native American United States Navy SEAL.
Wow.
And he operated with SEAL Team 1 in Vietnam. Okay, so now we got one more person introduced. I think her name is Leslie Fry.
Halito Chukachafa. That means one house. So we are all one people. And I just wanted to introduce myself. I am of Choctaw and Cherokee Catawba heritage. And I'm the executive producer of Jay Winter Nightwolf Live and a board member of Reflections of Turtle Island. Hello.
You're bringing in wolves, Leslie.
Yes, exactly. Right. And I just wanted to, introduce myself that way. And I am basically what I am is I'm someone who is a reconnector to my heritage. I'm learning something every day about my indigenous heritage.
Absolutely. So,
would you like to introduce yourself, Mr. Winter Nightwolf?
Oh, okay. My name is Jay Winter Nightwolf. I'm Cherokee, Shoshone, Taino, and Arawak. My father's people, my grandfather on my father's side was a Western Shoshone from down around the Four Corners out in Arizona. His wife, my grandma Sylvia, was a Taino Arawak from Old San Juan, Puerto Rico. My mother's people from South Carolina, all of those people are Cherokees. So I'm actually card-carrying member of the human family. And that's all I got.
All right. So let's start this fireside chat off this evening. Once again, I just wanted to let our audience members, please, in the chat feature of whatever you're looking at, YouTube or Facebook, ask a question of this panel this evening. This is the time right now. We don't get this very often. We try to do these fireside chats once a month, but we'll try to answer your questions. I know that we have a lot of people out there that are doing research on their family history, about their indigeneity and that intersection of that. But I believe that all of us here could answer those questions for you. So with that being said, let's talk about Thanksgiving while we're waiting for those questions to come in. A lot of us who are of indigenous heritage do not celebrate Thanksgiving. There is a history for why we don't. I think that most of us have been conditioned to believe that Thanksgiving is this moment in time when the colonists came here and were trying to establish themselves in the East Coast. and they were met by good-hearted indigenous people who helped them to learn how to plant their food. And they had this big feast at the end of it with Squanto, being the one who extended the olive branch to this community. I mean, all the little lies that we've been told about this holiday. So I just kind of want to talk about this holiday first. Let's start with Elder Nightwolf. Elder, what do you know about this history, and what can you tell our audience members about Thanksgiving?
Well, it was the Wampanoag people that they first met. And talking to a lot of Wampanoags that I know today, they are all under the same conviction. We should have left them on the beach, because what we did, we brought them in, we helped them to survive the first winter, we fed them, we showed them how to plant crops and everything else. But the Wampanoags are not really happy with that union that they had with them. I'm not either, because just about everything that they've ever said in that story of their first Thanksgiving has been a bald-faced lie. Squanto had been captive at one time, and he was just trying to make peace, But
Well,
if
the
I
story, people don't realize that he was captured. He was taken as a slave to Europe.
yeah,
And when he came back, when he was freed, he came back and all his people were dead. And why were his people dead? Because they were killed off by the colonists, and they were also killed off by the disease of the colonists. So the story that we hear, we don't hear the second part of that story about what he came back to. He was just trying to pick up the remnants of his people when he came back.
And they discovered that when they came over here, we had no immunity to the common cold. A lot of our people died from common colds, and they brought these other diseases with them, and some of them were planned diseases. So, no. Okay, somebody else can talk.
It was definitely to encroach upon more land.
Mm-hmm.
It was definitely about it, and it's always been about land and money. Anybody else would like to comment on the celebration of Thanksgiving?
Well, the actual dinner that they're talking about is when the Pilgrim men returned back from killing women and children that were in the Wampanoag village.
Mm-hmm.
And they celebrated their kill, the murder of all the women and children. And so that's something not worth celebrating. It is a day of mourning to most of us.
Yes. And go ahead.
I will point out that there are histories that show that story has developed over time and had elements added to make it a happier story. Mm-hmm. The true history seems very different from the stories we've been taught in school. And if you're paying attention at this point, with the advent of the internet, we can look at so much of the history that we've been taught needs to be corrected. But I would like to recommend for folks a specific documentary called Searching for Thanksgiving by a man named Harry Hubbard, which you can find here on YouTube. And it tells a very different story from what has been passed down to us today. And I think it's important for folks to look at those histories. And as I will probably say several times throughout this broadcast, to remember that we are still occupied and prisoners of war. This was just the beginning, this Thanksgiving story.
Yep. Lona, do you have anything to say about that?
Only I'm shocked to see the distortions. I knew that the story as passed down about them being grateful, that wasn't really what had happened, that, that the genocide had already started to take place. However, I did not know that the celebration was actually, they were celebrating the slaughter of Native women and children. That's new to me. Could you give me specifics in terms of the areas that took place in, specifically in terms of the slaughter of the families?
It was in Connecticut.
Yeah, New England, where the
Yeah,
Wampanoag people
New
were.
England.
So yeah, New England. If you go online, I think there's some YouTube channels of people discussing that, what happened to the people when they welcomed them. The Wampanoag people themselves speaking of that. Now, a lot of people would ask, why would they welcome these colonizers? And let's just be, people have been coming to Turtle Island for centuries prior to this. So it was never a takeover. It was never a war or a battle or anything. It was usually an exchange between cultures. We have been going over there. We discovered places in Europe, and they have been coming over here through land masses that existed back in those days. So the destruction that occurred when the colonizers came here was completely unexpected. Our people, as indigenous people, were just acting in the way they would. I mean, they're not going to watch somebody starve. They're not going to watch somebody struggle. They are going to help, which has been our nature, as always. We don't see any differences. At that time, we didn't. As them being white people from England, we didn't see that as a difference, except that they were just white people. We saw everybody as a brother and sister because we never assumed that they were going to come in and do these things, which is tragic in a sense. Because even today, despite the fact that we have been historically abused by colonizers, we still are these people. We're still generous. We still open up our spaces for these people to come and learn. It's just tragic because it's just who we are.
I got to tell you something, Leslie. The American Indian indigenous people discovered Europe long before Columbus was even a thought.
Yeah.
There were people from New England that actually rode across the northern Atlantic into Galway, Ireland. And the proof of that is in a book that's called The American Discovery of Europe by Dr. Jack D. Forbes. I'd urge everybody to read that book. But even with that, the next people that came here were the Chinese during the Ming Dynasty. They didn't come here to hurt anybody or marginalize anybody or take anything from anybody. They just wanted to see these people that were on the other side of the big water. And then the Phoenicians, they came here after the Chinese got here. And the white boy wants you to believe that they were white ocean going sea merchants. In fact, they were not. They were Africans that came here. And a lot of our people out of the New England part of this world actually traveled on their ships with them. And that's how American Indian people got involved in international trade on the high seas. So you all can just forget and erase all that mess that they taught you, because it's nothing but a pack of lies.
Can I also add to that? When they discovered Ireland, understand that Ireland was not occupied by Europeans at that time. So it was indigenous people meeting indigenous people.
Yeah.
People that were Celtic, which a lot of people assume that indigenous people are Native Americans or Polynesian people. But understand there are indigenous people in Japan, the Ainu. There were indigenous people in Ireland, the Celts. So these were people that actually occupied that time, that period. I will say this to you, and then let's go on, because we do have a question by our audience members. We don't, as much as we celebrate Thanksgiving, people celebrate Thanksgiving here, we find this is a time to gather with our family members. So this is what we do. We remember everyone that is lost to us, but we also gather with our family traditionally like everyone else does, but we do not call it Thanksgiving. That is not anything that we celebrate.
It's the National Day of Mourning.
Exactly. So let me just, Daniel Miller has a question. He said, I'm having a hard time finding information of the Etowah side of my family. Is there any information about the Etowah other than their mounds?
Yeah, there is a lot of information out there on the internet. Tony, you and I, we were looking at a documentary the other night. I forget what it was, but maybe there's something you could add to that story, that narrative.
Which narrative about the Etowah?
Hmm.
I cannot add to the story about finding the Etowah. I would recommend the same thing, though. As many of us are researching our genealogies now, as opposed to accepting the assigned races from Europeans, we're finding more and more information available online. Keep searching. It's been difficult for many of us to find those roots, but they are there. You have to do some very hard work in some cases, but you will find the information eventually.
I believe that it might be that you were watching Native America, by the way. It's a wonderful series on PBS called Native America. Cities of the Sky might be what
Yeah.
you were talking about.
Hmm.
And mound builders, which go back all the way to the BC area time period. Mound builders are not just restricted to the Etowah people. There were also Choctaw people who were mound builders. These are people who lived near rivers and created these sacred mounds. But I would definitely do some type of research on that. You're going to have to go back because the Etowah people are not what we traditionally know as tribal people of today. That's more of the ancient tribes. So you have to go back and get some information that way. And I hope that helps. But yeah, that requires a lot much more intense work. You may also want to go back to any historical museum like the Native American Heritage Museum, those kind of museums, and ask what kind of information that they can refer you to regarding the Etowah.
And
If I
access their
may,
sites online.
Yes.
if I
Did
may,
Did you know?
Wait, Lona was Lona. Go ahead.
I was
Elder
going to
Walker.
say, if I may, that the native people were not the only mound builders. Africans also build burial mounds, and I know this personally because I have a friend who has property in Culpeper County. The St. James River begins on his property, and they have a vast, I have to say, plantation because they bought hundreds of acres where their family had been enslaved, and they only knew it because they stumbled on markers as they're going through this land that's been abandoned. And the place where the original house where the Africans had lived, outside of that, the place is just completely littered with mounds as you approach their property. So natives were not the only ones. These are Africans that were enslaved here in the US that also built mounds.
Let me add something to that. Recent discovery and recent archaeology has proven that there are over 10,000 mounds built by Native Americans all over this Western Hemisphere. So that's something you may want to check into.
I think too, Lona, those mounds might have already been there because a lot of plantation owners were building on these areas where there were historical mounds. So the thing is that the exchange between Africans and indigenous people here in the United States, or what we call now Turtle Island, that exchange has been going on for a long time. We exchanged a lot of things between us because our interaction has gone on over 5,000 years between each other. So it wouldn't be surprising to me to see if Africans were building mounds based on what they learned here, or vice versa, because of our intersection that's been going on for 5,000 years.
I think that that's probably a good assumption or a conclusion. I know for a fact that they did the research, that he did the research, and they had the area tested and stuff like that. So it's consistent with the time that the graves that are marked. But these were a little early. These were the earliest. These were one of the earliest. What do you call it? I don't want to say slave dwellings, but the dwellings where the enslaved people lived, and in that area specifically. were tons of mounds specifically.
As we have this discussion, it's important, I think, for folks to remember, or to most people don't know this, there are more ancient ruins in the Americas and specifically in North America than any other continent. While our educations have redirected us to Africa and Asia and everywhere else, the fact is the oldest cultures seem maybe to come from the Americas. In fact, many scientists have argued that America is the oldest continent and the first to have risen from the oceans, and so it makes sense that very old cultures would be here. But in reality, there are more ancient ruins in North America than any other continent. We've simply been educated away from and directed away from it. So indigenous people did a lot of work here that has simply been hidden. For instance, covered over by golf courses and other what is it, parks. The areas that we have made national parks are hiding.
And like what was said, especially here on this coast, there was a lot of interaction between Africans and natives, especially the southern part of the East Coast for forever. And the interaction between the two, the intermingling and everything and all that, it's fact. You can't deny it, so I'm not surprised that it would be a mixture of the two at all, because I know for a fact in West Virginia, there's a whole mountainside full of mounds, and it could be a mixture of indigenous and slaves depending on the time period. It all depends on what area these people were from and how they took care of their deceased.
Can we agree to say enslaved Africans, because they were not slaves, they were Africans that were kidnapped and brought here? So if we could just agree to that.
They were Africans that were brought here and
enslaved.
And then enslaved. So
thank you.
We need to get away from terminology for a minute. Let's continue this broadcast.
Well, the thing is, what we must validate here is the fact that before there was the transatlantic slave trade, there was interaction between Africans, and indigenous people here, in particular from Mali and all of those areas. But what is common here is the building of the mounds, and this is something that we have seen all the way to Egypt, to Peru, to Mexico, is that there was this commonality, which infers to me that there was an exchange of ideas, an exchange of beliefs and cultures. Exactly. All right. So let's go into our next question. And once again, I want to tell our audience members, we are open to any questions that you may have. If you're doing any research on your family, if you just have a general question about indigenous people here in the United States, please, ask a question right now. And that's right, Danielle, please do not give up searching. The thing that I think a lot of us do, we get frustrated with all of the things that were hidden from us, the paper genocide, the census, the reclassification of Black people here in the United States, the reclassification of anybody that was indigenous. But as we advance in technology, you will be able to discover a lot more about your people and their history and your heritage. All right, let's go on to our next question. This is a question that was on the Native Brown Media site. Somebody wants to know what is a Black Indian? Who are Black Indians?
Me.
Yeah.
That can be covered. I mean, everyone else can answer as well, but what we have to understand is that there were melanated peoples on every continent. If we look at the colorful illustrations, drawings of the Mayans down in Mexico, all over the walls, not only are the people brown skinned, darker than I, in many cases, they have dreadlocks. We can see over and over in illustrations throughout South America that there were people here who the Europeans dubbed Indians, who were melanated and looked very much like us or darker. And beyond that, as Africans came here and Native Americans went there, there was intermingling, obviously, between peoples. People took wives and husbands from the other cultures and became made up what people think of now as Black Indians. For instance, as I understand the science, the people who were interested in slaves brought Black male Africans to the Americas, but there were no other women for them to take as wives but Native women. Those people are sometimes described also as Black Indians.
Well, you know what? I got to say something. Before the white man came here over 600 years ago, Native people were a lot darker. As well. No, I'm serious. They raped our women. They raped our girls.
I'm not laughing at that, but yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, everybody else was too.
There is a quote from one of the Europeans who arrived here, and I think it was Columbus, who said, referring to the Native women, look at these dark angels or brown angels. We will breed the color out of them in 3 generations. And I'm paraphrasing that terribly, but that was what they said basically. We will change their color in 3 generations. So you can find that quote pretty easily on the internet.
I remember reading something from the 1600s where he described people when he saw them, when the colonizers first came here, or colonists first came here, and they discovered them. They said that they were extremely dark. I mean, this is why Columbus thought this was India. They were extremely dark people. They came in different sizes, different hair texture. I encourage people to read the diaries of the first colonizers when they came here and their description of indigenous people when they came here.
The word Ethiopian is invoked regularly, or they look like the Ethiopians.
Yes.
The Europeans often used that word to describe the native peoples in the Americas.
All right, go ahead, Pete. Thank you, Tony.
Okay. That is a title given by the colonizers here. And the reason why I say that is because I know Apaches and other people from Arizona and the desert region that are very, very dark skinned. Okay. That is something that was given as a describing word to a person. If you're of native blood, you're native, okay? Or if you're American Indian, that's the way I like saying it, or indigenous, then that's what you are. The pigment of your skin means nothing because, like I said, let's go to Arizona and New Mexico and see how dark some of those American indigenous people are. So it's just a title to define. Actually, it's a title to divide people with, because where I'm from out west, there's still a lot of full bloods, and they look upon mixed bloods. Well, mixed bloods are this and this, and I always tell people, look, don't ever look down upon anybody. Okay, I was like, because what happened on the East Coast, those tribes took the brunt of the colonization of this country. There are tribes that do not exist anymore, that are extinct. Okay, when they finally came out west to us, yeah, we fought wars. Some of us won, some of us lost, but we didn't lose as bad as some of the people out in the East Coast. And because the intermingling of the Africans that came over here into some of the southern tribes and even northern tribes, what difference does it make? Okay, we're all from the human family, and that's the way we have to look at it. None of these titles of Black Indians or White Indian or Hispanic Indian, no, you're either you're American Indian or you're not.
Yeah.
So we believe this, Pete. We believe this, and I know that we know this and we recognize this. But society, of course, this, of course, here in America has divided us into races. And so as we know historically, based on how you phenotypically look, that is how you are identified. You're identified as Black, or you're identified as Hispanic, Native American. I mean, Daniel made a comment. He says that, you know, I'm on the other end of the color wheel, and that's because of the admixture of all of the races of people at that time. Some of us, and you said it, Pete, indigenous is indigenous. It doesn't matter what color you are, you're indigenous. As long as you hold that blood in you, you are still indigenous. Unfortunately, what we've seen on TV, what we've been conditioned to believe is indigenous, is how people identify us today. We know this, but the majority of people who are not of indigenous heritage do not recognize this. And so if I decided to get cast in a movie, or if I got cast in a movie playing someone who is an indigenous person, it would be a revelation to a lot of people, as opposed to you, Pete, who looks like the typical indigenous, or you, Elder Nightwolf, looks like the typical indigenous that they would portray or see, you know, as indigenous.
You're talking about the Hollywood Indian, the look of the Hollywood Indian.
But the whole mentality of Hollywood Indians, period. What we see,
true.
You know, what we see. Someone wanted to know what signifies a full blood.
It's a title given by the federal government that you can prove your lineage back to the reservation, and both of your parents are from that same reservation, and your great grandparents and your great great grandparents, that there is no mixture of any other races.
Do we think, does that still happen today, or is that not an uncommon thing?
Yeah,
So a lot of people are not.
Oh no, that's we're the only race in this country. Just like breeding horses and dogs, you have to prove your bloodline in that aspect.
You know, when I went to renew my driver's license, I think it was about 10 years ago, and I had to fill out the application, and it said race. I wrote down Cherokee, Shoshone, Taino, Arawak. And the lady looked at it. She said, "What is this?" I said, "That's who I am. I'm a Native American, period." So no, you ain't got to create anything. Just put it on my driver's license. I don't want to hear it. Okay. If not, you're going to have to lock me up, because I'm going to get crazy in here. So they put it on there. And then, of course, they passed a law, state of Maryland, where if you can prove that you're an Indian, they got to put it on your driver's license.
You know, interestingly enough, now too, the census has been broken up into 4 races: Hispanic, indigenous, Black, white, and Chinese, 5 actually. But now there are more people now identifying as of mixed heritage. Eventually that's going to be eliminated, because people are now saying, I don't identify as any of these specific people. I am of mixed heritage, and that's how I want to identify.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A True Seeker says, "Peace, elders. My people were absorbed into the Choctaw Nation from the Delta region of Mississippi. Most of my family stayed, and a few went to Oklahoma, and we became Article 14 citizens." And I think he hasn't finished his comment. True Searcher, can you actually finish your comment? I'm only getting half of your statement, if possible.
Well, while he does that, Chief Billy Tyack of the Piscataway Indian Nation here in Maryland, I had him on my show about, I guess, 12 years ago when I was on the other radio station. And I asked him, I said, "Uncle Billy, who is an Indian?" He said, "An Indian is one who carries the sacred ancient blood of the Western Hemisphere in his or her veins." He said, "I don't care if it's got gray squirrel in it and everything else." He said, "And only an Indian can recognize another Indian."
That's right. And he said that if you're not someone who carries that sacred blood, what are you called?
He said, "If you don't carry that blood, then you're part of a special tribe." It's called the Wanabe tribe. I said, what's the Wanabe tribe? He said, the wannabes.
And
Well,
let's talk about that.
to your point,
Go ahead.
Nightwolf, I've had the experience repeatedly, and my brother as well. My brother was working in Northern California, and a group of native brothers walked in and said, "Hey, we know you." And he was like, "No, I don't think you know me. I actually live in Los Angeles." And they were like, "No, we know you. We mean we see you. We're family. We
Mhm.
recognize in you that you are also native." And I have had this happen as well in Southern California many times, where native brothers have approached me and said, "We can see in you that you are also of native heritage." So an Indian can recognize an Indian.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. I remember I was speaking to a gentleman who was on a panel maybe 2 years ago, and he was speaking of that, and he said that he had gone to Peru, and he was sitting on the banks of a river with an elder, and the elder said, he said this specifically. He said there is no such thing as people of mixed heritage or whatever. He says, and he said, my spirit recognizes your spirit, and my
Whoa.
spirit knows that you are indigenous.
And you know the other thing too. If an Indian approaches you, or you visiting a community of native people, the first thing they'll ask you is, "Who's your family?
Who are your people?"
Yeah,
Yes.
who are your people?" And that you know that there's some truth in them, because when the first time I went to Oklahoma, I was sitting down with I believe her name was Tantu Cardinal and a few other natives, and they looked at me and says, "Who's your family?" I said, "What do you mean? What's your family's names?" And I gave them the names and found out that I had cousins out there in Oklahoma that I didn't even know existed.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's with us, it's about who's your family.
Yeah.
Well, traditionally, I know with my people and a lot of other tribes, when you introduce yourself, you're not mentioning your name first.
Mm-mm.
You're telling people what clan your mother came from, what clan your father came from, and then you tell them your grandparent. You start with your grandparents, your parents, and then you get to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when you present your name.
Mhm.
And that's the way it's traditionally done amongst a lot of tribes.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
So there's
I want
definitely
to bring up a point here that may be a little controversial, and it is the idea of, or at least from my perspective, the changing of the names of the people called currently African Americans every 10 years seems to me to be an attempt to disguise this connection to the land, the real connection to Turtle Island.
Mm-hmm.
In this regard, if you pull up the Civil Rights Bill and look at it itself, you will note that it is actually named the American Indian Civil Rights Bill, referring to the people of Turtle Island who were melanated. And this is while Dr. King was in full glory. They named the bill that gave civil rights to the folks now called African Americans the American Indian Civil Rights Bill. That should tell everyone something. Pull that up, take a look at it, and you will see for yourself that that is a fact. I believe it's an attempt to continue to remove us from the land.
And
Yeah.
it is. It is. I think that we could talk about Walter Plecker. Is that his name, Walter
Yeah.
Plecker? But let me explain to you, in my situation where my family is concerned, that we were of indigenous heritage, and I watched while I was doing my research the change of race from mulatto, which is what we now believe is of having a white parent and a black parent. But back in the day, mulatto meant that they could not, you had an undefined look. They couldn't determine what you were. They knew you were mixed heritage. So they either called you mulatto, mestizo, whatever by what they thought you might have, quadroon, whatever. I watched my grandfather's name on the Dawes roll go from mulatto, and then from the census go from mulatto to Negro to black, and then African American. And you're absolutely right. It is an attempt to hide that because of the one drop rule. If you were found, according to what eugenics Walter Plecker established that actually was adopted by the U.S., if you had 1% black blood in you, you were considered to be black, and that was changed on your birth certificate. So if you had a Native American or an American Indian on your record, and one parent may have been black, or it appeared that you look black, or you phenotypically look black, you were called black. And you were given, this is a caste system here, so you were given that classification so that you would not be able to own land.
The whole ambition of this white boy that came here 600 years ago was to destroy people of color. Prime example of that, the Speaker of the House. You got this guy named Tuberville from down in New Orleans. He would not pass the government budget because we didn't have a commandant of the Marine Corps, and the guy that's the most qualified is a black man. The Department of the Air Force, the guy that's highly qualified and recommended is a black man. And everything else as far as government, military, the people that are the highest ranked ones are black people or people of color. And that's why he held up the budget. They got a problem with us being so intelligent and so well-versed and so experienced, people of color. They don't want us in charge of anything. So think about that. Tuberville is a racist cracker, period. I'll give it, you know, you can call it what you want to call it, but that's what he is. As well as this fool in the position now. He's a racist cracker. I know somebody's going to be offended by me saying that.
Well, we understand. I want to get to this question because we do have this comment coming in. 1 second. And let's try to stay on topic just a little bit. So this gentleman, 111 Truth Searcher, was saying that he was absorbed, their family was absorbed into the Choctaw Nation in the Delta region of Mississippi. They became Article 14 citizens. And he said, if my family didn't keep our records, we would have been lost in the word translation and with those records. And how this is how he found his members in Oklahoma.
Okay.
Once again, we discussed the paper genocide that appeared between the connection between people from Oklahoma and the so-called African Americans or black people, which we know African Americans was a name that was given to us by Jesse Jackson. It was not a name that, this was not our name. He's our leader on TV. Yeah, well, he gave us that classification, but this is a common practice. The Dolls Row was one, also a paper genocide of people trying to claim their heritage of family members in Oklahoma. But let me just tell you something: blood does not lie. Blood does not lie. And the thing is that when you find your blood relatives, that does not lie. You can trace your family back, which is the case for most of us will be able to do that. You know, I don't care what Louis Gates says about everybody claiming to be indigenous.
He's an idiot.
By blood, but I am telling you, even if that blood does not show up in your DNA, if you take a DNA test, the fact that you can go back and trace your heritage to somebody still makes you indigenous because you are part of that sacred blood that still resides in you.
That's and remembering right. that a part of the way that the Europeans rule is to
Lona,
divide
Tony, exactly. That's okay. Lona, you haven't spoken, so let me go ahead and let you say.
I just wanted to say, in terms of, I don't know who came up and popularized the term African American. Frankly, I think it's closer to describing, this is for me personally, who we are, because a Chinese man, no matter where you find him, he's Chinese. A Japanese, no matter where you find him, he's Japanese. It's only us, we, who are darker than blue, who came here in coffles and chains, who are continuing the genocide of us losing our identity as being Africans and taught to be ashamed of it and called Black, Negro, and all those other things. I have no problem with African and African American. I think that's closest because I am American, because my people bled for this land, and I'm African also because of the deep, deep, rich melanin and my family. Well, we haven't traced it all the way back, but there are people there that says this is where you came from. So I have no problem with African American. It doesn't matter to me who coined the phrase. I think it most accurately describes who we are.
But let me ask you this. Would you rather classify yourself, or would you have somebody else classify you?
It matters not. I classify myself as an African American. It resonated with me. I think it's closest to being the truth. And that's why I think I think it's a good thing. I don't care who it comes from. Truth is the truth. To me, it resonates as true for me to be an African who lives here in America. So I'm an African American because my people bled for this land.
Okay, it does not resonate with me.
That's fine.
Let me just say something.
I could tell it didn't, Tony.
Let me just say something though. Let me just say something.
We don't have to be the same. We don't have
let's just say that that because of how you phenotypically look, does not denote that you are from Africa. Let's say that your percentage of African heritage is lower than, let's say, your indigenous heritage, because there were people that looked just like us that were indigenous. So these people are being classified as African American. Now, I'm greatly proud of all of my heritage, African, Irish, indigenous. I'm very proud of all of that. But I would rather, in this case, not have one particular identity lead the narrative for who I am. So claiming that I'm African, African, being that I am of African heritage, but then American is a very diluted terminology, because what classifies America when this is not America? This is Turtle Island.
So shall I say I'm African Choctaw Chickasaw?
I would say that's what you would say. That's right. That's what you would say.
Am I African Choctaw Chickasaw? Because I know that in Cuyahoga. Do I say that because I know that's where my people are from?
That's true, because America is not what we call America. America belongs to the indigenous people of Turtle Island. So you are of that indigenous heritage.
Tony, go ahead.
If I may quickly just say, we have records. There are very good records of how many people were brought here. And it turns out that only about 300,000 Africans made it to North America. Lots of Africans made it to the Caribbean, South America. 300,000. There are 10 million, 12 million of us. They can't all be descendant from those 300,000 Africans who were brought to North America. So
and therein lies the truth. That the misclassification and misidentification of Black people, or people who appear to be Black in this country. There were indigenous people that were enslaved during the transatlantic slave trade because they were dark skinned, and they were misclassified as Africans, and they were not.
And finally, one more point. I just want to shout out to little brother Cameron from the powwow this weekend, whose dancing really inspired me. Shouts out to you, young brother.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just say what metaphysics says. Peace, both my maternal and paternal grandparents are natives. Similar to you, let's fry on ancestry. I found out my people are from Iowa, particularly Wapello, Iowa. But the tribal affiliation lost, and I agree. Let me just see. I think he's finishing up his. Let's just go back to 111. I agree with elders. I don't hate no one, but I hate the fact that I have to prove who I am. And when I do, outsiders still say that they reclassify me as something that I'm not.
Touche. Good point.
Yeah. This is any resources that are available. Metaphysics, I would highly recommend. If you are still looking for your people, you have to do really stringent work on any type of census records. This is what we have. Tribal roles, the Dawes roll, look at that. But I think there are a lot of books out there that can help you too. Black Indians by Jack D. Forbes is something that you can read to kind of give you an idea of what happened to us here in the U.S. And then Mashpon Weshelman said, the term African American is why these laws enforcement kill our people like dogs, because we claim something that doesn't identify our bloodlines.
That's right.
Unfortunately, too, Mr. Quantu, the indigenous people here in the United States are incarcerated at a higher rate than people of color. I would say Black and Hispanic people by their by capita how they are, as far as a small minority of people, they are incarcerated more than Black people. So let's just say, and also killed by police officers. So we're running neck and neck as Black people and so-called Black people here and indigenous people.
And imagine the power if we could work with each other. Pete made a point earlier about dividing us. If we let go of these labels, this divide and conquer might be conquered.
Well, you know what? I'm going to tell you. I just got a call yesterday, and I get them like twice a week. Hi, my name is Jeff Wright. I'm with the police department asking you for a donation. I said, okay, I'm listening. He said, what can I do to get you to make a donation? I said, you can tell your white police officers to stop killing Indians and Black people. And he, oh, excuse me. I said, you heard what the hell I said. I said, when you all take away killing Black people and Native American people as your priority, then we could talk. Oh, he didn't. That white boy didn't like that. I know he turned redder than my shirt.
Well, you know, let's talk about too the incarceration rate of Black and indigenous people too, which has become a business. You know,
of course, it's big business.
It's definitely big business. So we've got like 1 minute, and I mean, we could definitely stay here and have more questions. If our panel wants to agree to do an extended, 15 more minutes, we can do that before we close out. If you have any questions or comments as people who are actually watching this episode of Jay Winter Nightwolf Live, please put your comments in there right now, and we'll try to get them in our next 15 minutes. I also would like to take this moment right now to say, if you have not subscribed to this channel, if you are watching from YouTube or Facebook, if you have not subscribed to Winter Nightwolf Productions on Facebook, or Jay Winter Nightwolf Live on YouTube, or Cliff Dive Productions on YouTube, we're asking that you do that right now. If you like this content, if you want to see more of this kind of content, please like, subscribe, follow, and share this content. Thank you.
Absolutely. So now we're into 15. I keep seeing this Joel Rosario Tapia.
Yes. Do
you know him, Tony? Is he one of your California brothers?
No, he doesn't have to be. He could be just a viewer watching. So
African American is an identity that is a property of the corporate U.S. and intellectual property.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yes. He said, read the implications and ramifications of artificial Black identity, a legal chronology of the Americans 1492 and 1968. Absolutely. He says you know him. Oh, he says he is Chief Turiyogo Taino.
Hey, I know him.
And you're asking me if I know.
Yeah.
Look, we really need your help. If this is the first time you watch this show, please go to not Facebook, but to what is it, Leslie?
You can go to Winter Nightwolf Productions, or you can go to Cliff Dive Productions, or Jay Winter Nightwolf Live.
And
on YouTube.
And like the show. Like the show. That means so much to us.
It does. Yeah. We want to see more content like this. We don't when it comes to speaking these truths, unfortunately, we don't see very much of that. And there's a lot of misinformation out there, other channels out there that are giving you the truth, but it's their truth. We can provide books for you, things that you need to read, but we would really like you to like and subscribe, because that actually helps us with our monetization, and it helps us to be able to provide more and better content for you all.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So let's get some closing thoughts before we end up, based on just based on our commentary. Well, first of all, I think that we should have more fireside chats. These
Yeah.
are, people need these. People want to learn more about their heritage, and if we can lead them. And if somebody has a personal question, how can they reach you, Elder Nightwolf?
I don't give out my telephone number.
No, I'm not saying
No,
that.
not
You have
that.
an email that you use, right?
Yeah, just go to jaywinternightwolf@gmail.com.
All
And
right,
have you
there
a
you go.
Facebook page? Is it
Yes.
Yes.
You can
Join
also
your
message
Facebook
us
page.
on Facebook. Message us on Facebook under Winter Nightwolf Productions or Cliff Dive Productions.
I made a mistake 30 years ago and gave my telephone number out on a radio show. Big
Yeah.
mistake.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just want to let all of you know that I love you dearly, and we are all part of the same family, the human family.
Yes.
And all that other stuff is a bunch of mess. Did you know that Adolf Hitler sent some of his representatives during World War II to the state of Maryland to find out how he could get rid of Jewish people on paper? Paper genocide is just as bad as actually killing somebody.
Yep. It definitely is.
Mhm.
There's a term that we have in the Aboriginal American community. When we are playing cards, we refer to pencil whipping, someone who cheats and takes score. I believe that is derived from paper genocide. They
Yep.
wrote it down on paper. They pencil whipped us and
Yes.
basically changed our identities.
Mhm.
If I may, though, Pete, I want to jump back to something else you said earlier. When I was a child, I was obsessed with Cochise and Geronimo. Geronimo is my favorite American, and there were illustrations of them in books. I read everything I could get on them. Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse. I was kind of obsessed. But as an adult, when I saw the actual complexions of those people, I was shocked to see that the Apache were, so many of them were so dark skinned. When I saw real photographs versus the illustrations I'd seen in the books I'd read as a child, it really struck me. And the point that you made earlier about being from that region and seeing folks who actually looked like that resonates greatly with me.
My favorite American was Chief Joseph.
Ah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This man was the greatest military strategist that ever lived. They're still teaching his strategy at the U.S. Naval Academy, West Point, and all that other stuff. Because he led the U.S. military around for days, and they couldn't capture him.
Yeah.
He had to finally give up.
I think so too. I would like to say that my favorite person is Juan Caballo or John Horse.
Oh,
Great
yeah.
Seminole, yes, Seminole chief that fought in what we would call the American, we would call the Indigenous Wars, American Indigenous Wars in Florida.
Yeah.
He was an amazing person. He eventually migrated to Mexico, where a lot of people don't know. One of the first presidents of Mexico was of indigenous and African heritage, and most people don't understand, know who he is. I mean, these are the kind of things that we would love to discuss and offer to our audience members, just so that you all can read and learn a little bit more about this identity, the intersection of indigenous people here in the United States. It's a great intersection. It's not only Black, but it's Mexican, white. There are so many people that we are mixed with greatness. But the most common thing about us is that we are those who are the original people of this place called Turtle Island.
Uncovering the truth about the hidden history of our people.
Yep, exactly. I would like to, before we go, because we've got just a few more minutes, I want to congratulate Big Pete and everyone who hosted the powwow last Saturday at Bowie State. Amazing.
Yeah.
So just so
that was
we don't know.
that was a task and a half.
Yes.
The original idea came from the twins, Noah and Eva
Yeah.
Austin, and myself and Dr. Peters from Bowie State University Multicultural Center were able to put this together in 6 months.
Amazing.
And it normally takes a year, calendar wise,
Yeah.
to put a powwow together. But I was pleasantly surprised at the turnout and very satisfied with everything that happened that day. And the creator really smiled upon us to allow everybody to show up and really, especially the dancers, the vendors did well.
The singers and the
just,
drummers.
just to get the message out, number one, that we're still here. And because of the date it was on, we honored our veterans. Because one of the things a lot of people don't realize is we as American Indians have fought in every single conflict this country called United States of America has ever had.
Yep.
So we honor our warriors from the beginning to end and even to today. Okay. We honored the murdered and missing women, people, and two spirits with the red dresses that were brought to the middle of the circle. I gave a little speech on that. But
can I let me explain to people what the red dresses mean very quickly if we have people here that aren't familiar.
The red dresses represent an individual person who is either missing or murdered that are American Indian and or indigenous, because that is an epidemic that is in our community. American Indian women, indigenous women have the highest rate of murder, sexual assault, rape, and or some sort of domestic abuse of any race in this country. Following people of color next, including African American, Asian American, Latino. So, and it's all because of the way the laws are written. And we can get into a whole nother hour plus talking about that subject, but it's really important to educate people about us so that they know that we're still here and the fight that still goes on and the genocide that we're still up against.
Exactly. Maybe we'll do a segment on MMIW because that also extends to sex trafficking, excuse me, that word, with our young boys and young girls and our two-spirit people. So maybe we'll come on and have you back to talk about that because I think most people do not know about that. My sister is a detective and she wasn't even aware of it. So, we need to gain more knowledge on the fact that this is happening in our community.
And we start in January planning the powwow next November.
Awesome. Well, it was very, very successful. I tell you, I mean, it was wonderful just being there in a historically Black college and actually seeing that. I mean, you're going to be something when you've got the Hebrew Israelites showing up at your doorstep.
Yeah, and they got put out.
Trying to educate people. Yeah, but it's something when they show up. So, they felt like they had to come in and give their 2 cents.
Yeah,
there are a lot of questions coming in right now.
And they got swept out the door, too.
Yeah,
I like to say greetings to my brother, Charles Tadoko Moore, who watches us every week. And Charles is actually the great-great-great-grandson of one of the Dakota 39 that were hung by Abraham Lincoln in Minnesota. Charlie, be talking to you soon.
And he mentioned Crispus Attucks, which we all think of or have been told historically that Crispus Attucks was the first Black man to die during the Revolutionary War against the English and the Americans. But in actuality, he was of Black and indigenous heritage, and people don't know that. But he has been wiped out of our history as being of mixed heritage as a Black man and just been notarized as a Black man. But he is, I'm not sure if his mother was Osage or Ottawa, and his dad was African.
Yeah, his mom was an Ottawa Indian.
Yes, yes. So, you know, that's something that all my life I've been thinking, that I was thinking to myself, why would this Black man go and fight so hard in that war, you know, when he was a slave? And this is my mind, because this is what I've been taught historically. I thought he was a slave, a free man of color of mixed heritage.
It speaks to the importance of recognizing the miseducation we've all been under.
That's right.
To do our own research to restore truth and knowledge to this conversation.
Right.
It brings me to what I wanted to say as my final comment, and basically that's question all you think you know, because there's a reason that it's called his story.
Exactly. And let's say this: we've been indoctrinated to believe these things.
Oh yeah.
We have one more question that I want to answer, because we got a lot of comments flooding in at our last 1 minute before this. So, why is the European term Africa still being used when the continent has hundreds, if not thousands, of nations that domicile there? I would say that a lot of that is due to the fact that it's finances. It's got something to do with money and land, and it always has something to do with money and land. I mean, we could go into it. We only have 1 minute. But why it is still called Africa, and why it is still accepted as African by people who have lived there, who are indigenous to that place. But there's definitely a reason why it is still the way that it is, and it definitely has to do with money and land.
It's the white boy's story. It's the white boy's story.
Yeah, if you speak to those people, they don't often refer to themselves as Africans. Rather, they refer to themselves as the nation they come from, or the tribe they
come from.
They derive from.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But it's just called Africa because, I mean, sometimes, you know, just trying to tear away centuries old of misinformation is going to take some time, you all, but it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. All right. So we are at the 8:15 mark. I want to thank our panelists for coming back. I would ask if you all could come back again when we have another fireside chat. We would love to see you all, give you an opportunity to talk more. I mean, Pete is tired. He's sitting over there being real stoic. And Lona, I'm so sorry we didn't get to really talk to you. I mean, there have been some really great comments here, and I mean, we all have something to offer to this discussion. But I want to thank you all so very much for joining us. Next Wednesday, we will not be here, and we will be celebrating our National Day of Mourning right before. But we will be back the following Wednesday. And then we will be going on a brief holiday hiatus during the summer months and returning in January. So thank you so much for joining us. Once again, we want to ask you to like, subscribe, share this content, comment, you know, do anything. And then we'll try to, if you have a question that didn't get answered tonight, please put it in the comments and we'll try to answer it sometime later on. And everything. But thank you all so much. Elder, would you like anything to say before we close out?
Yes. As I always close, it's not about the color of your skin, the texture of your hair. It's not about the deity that you pray to and call your God. Do you know what it's really all about? My grandfather used to always say that. It's how you treat my heart. Your brothers and your sisters do not necessarily have to look like you to be your brothers or your sisters. If somebody treats your heart right, that's your brother and your sister. So I'll close in the words of Cherokee. Danada, Goai, Wado. And Wado in Cherokee means thank you. Thank you all.